So creating content between consumers and brands I've been in various iterations of that throughout my entire career, and I think it's important on the basic level to understand the power of both. So I've had the great privilege of working with incredible brands in my career, iconic brands from Procter & Gamble, General Motors, more cultural brands, fashion brands, and I've also really seen the changing landscape of the consumer. And there's a lot of talk now about the pace of consumers and the control that consumers have over the content they create. And so that's really awesome because it makes the bar really high for the content that we have to create. And we have to understand all the ways that consumers are creating content, because often they're leading the way in terms of forming new patterns of content consumption. But because at my heart I'm sort of a brand geek, I always remember that the power of a brand to lead people and to show them surprising things that they didn't expect or that they're not creating themselves. So I think it's finding that right balance between what do people want, but then what does the brand want to do? What's the brand purpose, and how can it lead people a little bit, and how can it give them something surprising or something unexpected that they wouldn't have otherwise expected from the brand. So for me, it's always been about the balance between the two, and really respecting the power of the consumer, but also really appreciating that brands have great potential and always seeking to push that and fulfill that. I think one of the biggest challenges brands face in connecting with consumers today is just the number of choices they have for all the ways that they can connect, and it quickly gets overwhelming. And we always advise our clients to kind of remember what the brand fundamentals are. So a brand could have 100 conversations that it puts out there on a daily basis, but should it be having all of those conversations? Or maybe there are 5 conversations that brand should be having with consumers. So I always kind of urge my clients to make sure, especially in the terms of social media and digital media, they're not that annoying person at the party that's running up to everyone saying, "Hey, what are you guys talking about? Can I join the conversation?" You want to be relevant, and you want to be relevant to not just what people want, but what the brand has to say. And there are just areas that the brand can be and areas that the brand probably shouldn't spend its time. Not every brand has to do a tweet on the Oscars night. That's not what every brand needs to do. So I think, it's really important to have focus and to have discipline and to make sure you're doing the right 36 degrees of activity and not doing all 360 degrees, because that's the temptation. Brands of all sizes, and all of our clients, I remember 5-10 years ago, it was like the D word, digital. And now it's becoming more and more about social media and about real-time media and how do I get involved in all of these things. And there are definitely parameters that we advise our clients to follow. And one of them in particular is, if you're a big brand, act small. If you're going to be in social media, find a channel and figure out in that channel, let's say it's Instagram, is the audience that you want to reach there, and figure out how do you need to behave in Instagram. There's a way you want to behave in that channel that's organic to the content that people are creating. So if you're going to go there and you're going to be in these social channels, make yourself feel like you're part of the community. And there are brands that do an incredibly great job. One of the brands I love to follow on Instagram is General Electric, of all things, because they put beautiful photographs, but they are themselves. It'll be a beautiful photograph of a giant digital turbine engine. So they're not trying to be cool and hip. They're being themselves, but they're bringing that art of photography to a channel that really appreciates the art of photography. Another thing we like to talk to clients about is tapping into influencers. And obviously the audience of influencers is growing and growing. You have YouTube stars who are more known to my children than television stars. So you start to think, how are we going to really partner with these people in an authentic way? And I think that's really the key, is finding an authentic relationship and honesty and transparency. And there's a term we use called native advertising, which is really when the bespoke content is about the brand and it's a commercial post and it's a paid for post, but there's no more of this trickery of trying to hide it. It's, there are brands like the New York Times that we partner with frequently that are doing amazing things in native content, and everyone knows it's a paid post, but it's a great piece of content that people want to read. They did an amazing piece on Orange is the New Black, and it was a journalistic piece on women in prison. So I think transparency, honesty, I'm being paid for this is what I think, and then make sure you find the right affinities for the brand. So if we want to talk about current trends in technology and how that's affecting brand and marketing and communications with people, I'll start by maybe talking about something that's really techy, which is virtual reality, and the sort of pure connection of marketing and technology. The Consumer Electronics Conference in Las Vegas used to be this conference about, with talking refrigerators, and it was basically home appliances, and it was very gadgety, and now every brand is there. This year there were 170,000 people there, and one of the things that obviously people were talking about was virtual reality, because it's reached a price point with the handsets. Our client Samsung produces a very affordable VR handset. So I think in the pure techie sense, there is a real opportunity to find a way to, how are we going to commercialize and monetize VR and make meaningful content for consumers? And what tends to happen in technology is a new platform comes out, and advertising and marketers come in and they pull formats from the last platform and they plug it into the next platform. So you think early web was really like a digital magazine before everyone found out that, oh, there are hyperlinks and this is nonlinear storytelling. So I'm really excited to see where the creative thinkers at MediaVest, and we have people thinking about this, what is the commercial storytelling form going to be in VR that adds value to the experience, that helps scale it, that helps make it more shared, and that helps us bring it to our clients. So VR is something I'm really excited about, and we're doing a lot of thinking about that here. But even in a broader sense, if you think beyond technology, it's a big canvas. Consumers no longer see channels or technology. They have a phone in their hand and they're pulling everything in through it. So really there's just a big canvas. So everything's up for grabs, and are there other new forms that can be exploited or partnered with? So even partnering with content platforms like BuzzFeed and going to them and giving them your brief and saying, Zay Frank, what would you do with this? What would you make with this? So there are so many different ways to partner and share in creating that content. Once you get beyond that, is it technology, or is it a new voice in the landscape? Is it a new form of content marketing? So I think there's just this big canvas. And kind of going back to what I said earlier, it's having a discipline to say, what are the right 36 degrees of that canvas that we think we can competitively own, and that we can scale, and that we can make efficient, and we can make interesting and valuable to consumers. So a question about the future of advertising looking 10 years out. And when I answer this, I always think Bill Gates once said something that I love, which is that we tend to overestimate the amount of change in the next 3 years and underestimate the amount of change that's going to happen in the next decade. So I think it goes beyond whatever new technology platforms are going to be. And I think we'll be at a point where the value exchange between brands and people is totally transparent, and there's mutual control on both sides. So if you think about a brand like Airbnb that does such a great job of creating travel information on their website that it becomes as good as buying a photo's guide. So they're putting out content that is so valuable that I really want to use it. So that kind of value exchange is going to only get dialed up and dialed up. And I also think of a brand we work with a lot, Spotify, that you have a choice. Do I want to not pay for this and have advertising, or do I want to pay for it? Either way, you're acknowledging as a consumer this costs money to have this incredible, amazing music service, which, by the way, we used to be able to get music free, and now we're paying for it. I mean, a company like Spotify has innovated something better than free because they've made their commercial model transparent. You want this, it's amazing. You can either have it free and pay for it with ads, or you can pay for it. And I think that kind of transparency in how things get paid for, and then what kind of value exchange there is between consumers and brands, is going to be all out on the table in 10 years. And we'll be designing what we want to experience, and we're going to be designing how all of the creators of that content get compensated, the distributors of it, and I think everyone's going to just be a lot more transparent about it. So I think that's really interesting when I'm raising 2 children and seeing their inability to discern between an ad they love or a short film on YouTube. For them it's great content. So there's a lot of those old rules are falling away. If you think even 5 years ago it was not cool if you were a band and your song was in a commercial, now it's a legitimate way to launch your career. So I think much more big changes on the value exchange and the commerce and the transparency of business models. So climbing the career ladder as a female, a woman in the workplace, is, I think, for any young people, it's just becoming a more and more complex issue. And so I made a lot of mistakes, so I don't know how good I am at giving advice, but I think one of the things that I did early on, whether I did it deliberately or not, was I tended to work for bosses and not jobs. So I tended to really connect with people. And for me early on, having some strong female bosses was really, really influential on me. Even in graduate school, I was always attracted more to the female professors and what I learned from them. So I think early on, a piece of advice I might give is make sure you're working for the boss as much as you're working for the job. And I would also say getting a variety of experience is good, but don't jump around too much. And I think one of the mistakes I made is I often got bored and left before I really invested myself. So it's great to get that variety of experience, but the only way you're going to learn to be a leader is to develop human skills and to understand how to work with people and how to overcome challenging relationships versus quitting your job and going somewhere else where that person you don't like isn't. So those human skills in the workplace are so important, and those are really developed when you have some depth and you put some skin in the game and you stick with a company when it's doing great or when it's not doing great. So remember that the morale of the place you work is about the energy that you're projecting, and it doesn't just happen. Morale really comes from you. So I think I would give those combinations of pieces of advice, knowing that I did many of those things wrong early in my career. So failure, overcoming failure in my career, well, that means I have to think back on painful moments. So I would say one of the things that I learned a lot of failure, I learned a lot from was when I was first in a C-suite role. I was a chief strategy officer of an agency, and I had a team, a department, and I was brought in sort of to be a change agent and shake things up. And I think one of the mistakes I made was I didn't listen to the team. I didn't get to know the place, and I kind of went in guns blazing with, I know everything, and I've been hired to do this, and I'm going to really shake things up. And I ended up alienating a lot of the people in the department, and I lost some people, and I had to go back and really rebuild the relationships and be honest with them about the mistakes that I'd made. And I ended up having some of the greatest friends of my career coming out of that experience. But early on, it was really about when you go in as a leader and you begin to get promoted, the responsibility you're taking on is to actually help the people around you more. So it becomes less about you and more about the teams you're building and the people around you as you move up in your career. And I think when you get that first big jump, you'll often forget that, and you'll often think, wow, I am really hot and this is all about me, but it really is all about the team that you're building. And so that was a big lesson for me. And the amount of time you spend as a leader listening to your team and listening to people you work with, you have to invest in that, and you have to put a lot of effort in that, because it doesn't matter how great the creative product is, how great your technology is. If you're not taking care of your people, your company will fail. So that's one lesson. And then with clients, the business that I'm in, we are an agency, and clients change agencies a lot. So I think with clients, it's about being really honest and upfront when mistakes have been made, but also sticking up for yourself when you feel like you have an opinion. So we don't want to just sort of follow every sort of lead that the client gives us, because they want us to push back, right? So they want us to have an opinion. So I think with clients, it's finding the right balance of, we screwed up, we made a mistake, versus actually we think this is the right thing to do, let's have a conversation about it. So there I think it's just quick admission and having a quick conversation and getting things out in the open. So I love to talk about working with creative people, because I have most of my career worked with creative people. And I think one of the mistakes that people make is thinking that you have to let them do whatever they want, that you sort of give them a lot of toys and let them play. And actually, when you're working with creative talent, it's actually important to be very specific about the problem that they're solving and giving them a very focused assignment. Like, here's what you need to go do and make in order to solve the problem. And when you give creatives a tight brief, it actually liberates their creativity. So I think that's one of my biggest pieces of advice, is to give them a tight brief and make sure you're specific about what they need to do, and to tell them why they need to do it, because they're solving a problem. So good creative people who are in professional fields are problem solvers. So they're not artists per se, they're artists who like to take their art and solve business problems. So remembering that and respecting that. I think the other thing is also when you give feedback to creative people, it's important to evaluate ideas and concepts in terms of where they can go next. So if you've got 3 ideas you're looking at, what I like about this idea is this because it could go here next, versus I don't like this idea, I don't like this idea. So when you're invited into the creative process, if you come with a critiques hat on, you'll find yourself invited less and less. But if you come with a constructive hat on, you'll also be respected and you'll be brought in earlier. Don't go in and just say, everything's awesome, oh my God, I love it. Give them advice, but always think about how can I make it better, how can I make it smarter, how can I move things forward, and they will be your best friends, and they'll be coming to you early, and they'll be showing you things when they're not done yet. And then it's really exciting because then you're involved in the creative process more and more upstream. So being a working mother and success at that, so I have a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, so I've been doing it for a decade. And I think for me it was getting over the myth of work-life balance, because if work and life are in balance, then you're always trying to find the perfect ratio of each. And I can't remember what someone once told me, another female executive, it's about work-life integration. So finding ways for those things to exist together and pull them together. And integration, when you're doing any kind of integration with creative people, with technology, with brands and consumers, we all know it's messy, it's complicated, and it's iterative. So for me, my working relationship with my children and my family is integration, and it's iterative. So I might have to miss a birthday party this year, but I won't miss it next year. So it's always about doing the best I can and realizing that it's an integration and it's not about finding the perfect balance, because that doesn't exist and it won't happen. So how can we be smart and move forward in this world of changing technology? And I guess I have two. If I could go back to my 21-year-old self, I love that setup. I would say 2 things. One is be a user of everything, every new technology, every new app. Don't think you're not the target audience. Download it, use it, become a user. So that's kind of practical advice. But on a more emotional side, I guess I would tell myself, you are the one you're waiting for. And if there's a problem at work, it's about you. It's not about someone else. The next job isn't going to solve the problem. You have to take responsibility to fix things. So it's up to you. And if you want to change things, you need to do that for yourself. And I think that's advice for anyone, for male, female. You're the one that's going to make it happen, and you're the one you're waiting for. Don't blame anyone else. Take responsibility and take risks and make it happen for yourself and make yourself happy.